The conversation that the cabinet secretary, the acting cabinet secretary in charge of National Treasury started last week, that is Ambassador Ukuri Yatani, and he says that the government ministries and agencies are now required to observe what he is calling austerity measures to ensure that they're able to secure some funds that are going to go to the Big Four agenda. Some of the things that will be affected is that there has been a freezing of all employment. There will be no supply of what you call the newspapers. Airtime has also been capped, and as we wait for that story, which can really signify what the impact of what is happening from the Ministry of Finance, I want us just to ask, how possible is it to achieve austerity measures, not just at the national level, but also at the county level? I want to begin with you, Speaker Kagucia. When you hear every cabinet secretary in charge of finance, because this has not started yesterday, we've had it even in the past when I believe it was Kipipiri MP, Amos Kimunya was Minister for Finance. Yeah. These austerity measures, how effective are they in saving resources that are to be diverted towards development?
I think a lot of times these austerity measures do not succeed. Mm-hmm. And the reason is because a lot of times we focus on areas where we do not have a lot of impact, rather where we make good PR. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For example, when a Kenyan hears that traveling for politicians has been freezed, mm-hmm. they celebrate. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people are duped to imagine that now there will be a saving. But when you look at government, mm-hmm. you need to ask yourself, how many politicians do we have? How many people are elected as politicians in this country? Mm-hmm. And I think media, you are also very good at that. You focus quite a bit on the politicians. Mm-hmm. But sometimes you don't get so much impact on that, mm-hmm. Because you have about 2,200 MCAs and about 400 and something parliamentarians. Mm-hmm. So you're talking of less than 3,000 politicians. Mm-hmm. But when you look at the executive in terms of the government, mm-hmm. We have a lot of people who occupy those positions, and the numbers are huge. For example, the traveling of all politicians. Mm-hmm. And then you find you have about thousands of civil servants, again, who are going to conferences, going to other meetings. Now, I'm not trying to say that we should abate mm-hmm. Traveling by politicians, not at all. But what I'm trying to say is, let us look at austerity measures in a more wider manner, mm-hmm. in a way that will ensure that government as a whole, executive, the political class, and at every level, mm-hmm. That is addressed. But the best way to address this is also at the budgeting level. You know, if you budget for all these functions, when you're doing the national budget, mm-hmm. and then you introduce austerity measures through a circular, mm-hmm. you don't achieve much. Mm-hmm. Just at the point of budgeting, yes, do a budget that has the austerity measures in it. Well,
speaking of then a budget that has austerity measures, MCAs had rejected, if my memory serves me right, had rejected foreign travel guidelines that were placed there. Mm. I know you mentioned that the austerity measures don't work, but that is just speaks volume about our MCAs and their behaviors. I am not very certain of the guidelines that MCAs have rejected, mm-hmm. But and MCAs are my employers, by the way. Mm-hmm. but see, on a very serious note, MCAs wouldn't have a say, mm-hmm. on budget matters, because budgets are usually appropriated at the national level. And once a budget has been appropriated, then when it comes to through what we call CARA, at the MCA level, at the assembly level, at that point MCAs already have their share. Mm-hmm. Like now, as an assembly, you already know how much you have as an assembly, and you don't expect assemblies to start using the monies which is therefore recurrent to go and do hospitals, to go and do roads. For that money, normally they will do it. They will use it in recurrent areas. But if at the level of budgeting, mm-hmm. these budgets are looked at in a different way. Speaking of budget, Honorable Oluoch, will this help us tame our growing wage bill? Will it help us cleanse our ballooning wage bill? Will it be able to do what Yatani and the entire government are trying to do?
I don't know. I want to believe that maybe it's for the best of intentions, but as a member of parliament, I'm trying to question the legality. of this, because every year, and I think he has tried to hint at it, every year the Cabinet Secretary and Treasury put a budget policy statement, and then we go through, actually Parliament shuts down literally, and the government shuts down literally, so that we interrogate the budget policy statements, we interrogate the numbers, there is public participation. After going through all this, and we say this is our budget, and it's appropriated through a bill, what's the legality of coming up with quote-unquote austerity measures? What's the legal base and anchor of the so-called austerity measures? Austerity measures are supposed to be presumed in the budget policy statement. How are you going to raise taxes? Where are you going to cut wastage? Where are you going to put more development money?
Right.
So how do you come up with something called austerity and then say don't travel, when we went through public participation and say this and this is necessary?
But Honorable, it wasn't not traveling. It's a matter of, if it's you traveling, you'd have to only travel with 2 more people plus you, 3 maximum.
That's okay, but we are just 3 months before the budget. Why didn't we say that? Because then we have a budget every year where we will take the whole country around thinking about, and there are all manner of experts and technical people who sit through this. Why not think through that at that particular time? The only thing that tells you then is that the budget, the government usually presents a bloated budget, which then at the end they don't really think those monies are going to be used. So they are going to say now, go for a trip where you have 3 people instead of 10. Why did you put 10 in the first place? And this is my question. On the second issue is on the question of the counties and how we can help the counties in terms of austerity. And there has been this discussion, and I have put a bill, a proposed bill which is going through the process, so that we may have a capping, so that no more than 70% of the money that we vote to the county, and this year maybe we had 360 something billion, no more than 70% of this money should go to recurrent expenditure. We have a situation in which some counties do up to 75-80%. So I think we need to have some kind of inbuilt into the budget process itself, plan with it. Only 30% will go into recurrent. Let's do 70% development expenditure. But I do not agree that 3 months into the budget, you're going to have a supplementary budget. You're talking about austerity. These terms don't exist in our Public Finance Management Act. They don't exist in any of the budget policy statements that were put forward.
All right, Honorable Oluoch. Of course, you may excuse the CS because he's a new officer there. There is also a new principal secretary. Maybe they're finding new ways of doing business. We'll talk about that shortly. But first, let's take a look at that particular story that the government has, with immediate effect, suspended all benchmarking and study tours by both national and county officials, as well as so many other issues that are called the austerity measures that Honorable Oluoch disagrees. Let's just take a look at that story.
In a memo to all cabinet secretaries and accounting officers, Acting Treasury Cabinet Secretary Kagucia Tani issued a raft of policies aimed at reducing the government's expenditure. Under the directive, domestic and foreign travel has been restricted, with the infamous benchmarking and study tours abroad suspended with immediate effect. The latest budget implementation review report by the Controller of Budget shows that 47 counties incurred a total of 14.6 billion shillings on domestic and foreign travel over a period of 9 months. MCAs using a whopping 5.1 billion shillings in foreign travels as they engage in benchmarking tours. To cut cost on foreign travels, the number of any government delegation led by a cabinet secretary has been limited to 4 individuals, including the CS, while those by a principal secretary should not exceed 3. Public servants attending any international meetings, workshops, seminars and study tours must justify and seek approvals. All ministries and government departments have been instructed to use teleconferencing technology or use government embassies instead of traveling outside the country. In addition, all domestic air travel has been confined to the economy class. To control misuse of government vehicles, no officer should use government transport outside working hours unless authorized by an accounting officer in writing. Use of official government vehicles during the weekends has also been banned.
The cuts will be brutal, will be sustained and without option. And it's high time that we adjust accordingly, because the success of this government will depend entirely on our dignity as a country to be self-sufficient in our own development priorities.
On communication and airtime, all accounting officers have been instructed to reduce the quantum of airtime given to public offices by 30% and encourage use of internet calls. On publicity and advertising, all ministries and departments have been instructed to stop the use of newspaper advertising, but instead use government websites. Other areas likely to be affected by the new rationalization plan include acquisition of vehicles, renting and partitioning of offices, purchasing of furniture, whose budget has been cut by 75% over the next 3 years. That the government plans to rein in on its spending is not anything new, despite its appetite for spending. What Kenyans will be keen on is to see whether the government will stick to its new diet plan. Faisal Ahmed, Citizen TV.
So quite a mouthful of all the things that the Cabinet Secretary is proposing there, but understandably there should be introduced a supplementary budget to make good of those promises.